Hey there. So my next guest was pushed into the esports world. Well, pushed into the career track he ended up going into in the esports world about 3 years ago. And thankfully he did, because now he's living the life of his dreams. He gets to do the thing that makes him super happy. And he's in charge of managing part of an esports company. So this is really cool. I know you all are going to love this one. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Gamerpreneur podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Carlton. Today, I have a very special guest with us. I have Chris Lessard, aka Boop. Hey there, Boop. How's it going?
It's going well. Happy to be here, Doctor.
Thank you. It's kind of a joke, by the way. I do have a doctoral degree, but please don't call me doctor. Just call me Brad.
Will do, Brad. Will do.
All right. So, Boop, where do you hail from?
So I'm originally from Boulder, Colorado. I went to school here. I've been here for 10 years. I was
Go Buffs.
Go Buffs. I was an East Coast transplant, and the second I landed in Colorado, I was like, this is my home. I like it here so much more. And I met my husband here. We have a house here in Boulder, and that's where I'm at, which is actually really interesting because I'm the only North American representative at my company.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I like to tell everybody that, I went to see you myself.
Oh my goodness. That's awesome.
I collapsed my lung on campus.
I wonder why.
During a snowstorm, like blizzard, like hit a patch of ice.
At CU, you never know.
That's right. And the funny thing is, I didn't know I collapsed my lung. So I had to go to class the next day, just thinking I had like a Charlie horse or something. And I tell people it was uphill both ways. And it was true.
Going to school uphill both ways at Boulder. That's very, very true. I used to we literally have a place here in Boulder called The Hill, right? It's kind of like where all the youngins go party. And I used to live up there. And I remember just being late to class and just sprinting in the snow and ice, getting there. And so ladies and gents at home, and pals at home, if that doesn't prove that you can be successful after being an idiot in college, after this podcast, I hope that is what you learn.
I love it. All right, let's get to the actual podcast. All right, so Boop, I like getting the show started right into it. So why don't you begin by telling us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, so I am Chris Lessard. Boop is my in-game name, and I got my start in esports about 4 or 5 years ago with Overwatch. One of the most intriguing things about this is I was originally a caster. So my husband and I were at a Hearthstone tournament that me, him, and a friend were competing at, and I got spanked. I got eliminated in the first round, really quickly. And apparently one of their casters didn't show up, and my husband and I had been talking about it. And then finally, my husband stands up and goes, he wants to cast. And that was the beginning of it all. And through that, I got to meet some people at Carbon Entertainment. And their most well-known thing was the very first ever competitive season of Overwatch, pre-Overwatch League. And I did the shoulder content there. The Boop of the Week is probably the most recognizable thing I did there. After that, I was not held on for Contenders or Overwatch League at the time. And I went back and, I was like, I did a lot of content creation. I've done a little bit of casting, and I want to do this forever. Right. This is amazing. And so I got into the casting business at that time, and I got I got moderately successful there. I ended up getting back onto Contenders, which is like the tier 2 Overwatch, right below it would be like the collegiate level of the NFL, for example. And I got to cast it for 3 seasons. Through that, I got a lot of networking done. And through all that casting, I've gotten to work with a lot of people, which introduced me to a lot of business makers and deal makers in this particular industry. Along with my music education degree back in college, mentorship became extremely important to me, because as a caster who has gotten screwed over a lot. Every caster has gotten screwed over at some point, right? I don't want that to happen to other people. And even though they're my competition, and even though it might affect me in a negative way, that doesn't really matter. And so that mentorship moved into a talent manager position after the casting stuff kind of slowed down. And so I was a talent manager for a little bit at a company called Esports, and I did a lot of mentorship. Basically, every single caster you see on an Overwatch broadcast that's a tier 2 or below is a caster that I have had some part in training. And even through that, that was kind of like my behind the camera work I needed to do to be qualified to eventually get to where I am right now, which is the managing director of an esports production studio called Monkey Bubble. We are mostly in charge of Overwatch's tier 2 events and some other things potentially, fingers crossed, hopefully. And we're really excited to expand our portfolio because we have a lot of people on the team that like things that are production based, and we want to be able to provide our passion to things in esports, but as well as conventions, concerts, churches, all that kind of stuff, to help the world kind of connect with each other again in this crazy time. So that's my journey from A to C. What it looked like in the middle was very intriguing, and probably the only tuba player, talent manager, managing director in the world. In esports, former caster. I have like a lot of really unique experiences, both in teaching, managing, networking, that I think this has really culminated into this wonderful position I got at the beginning of the year.
All right, that is awesome. And that is a lot to talk about here coming up. Before we do that, though, I'm going to go through a couple questions. I start every interview with a single question. So I'm going to ask you, like I ask everybody else, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being high, how weird are you, Boop?
How weird am I? Oh, like 11, dude. Like, I am.
Why is that?
You will never, and I can guarantee this, and everyone listening right now, you will not meet another Boopasaurus in your life. Not just in name, but also, I come with a lot of unique experiences and a lot of unique life experience. Had to grow up pretty fast, and because of that, I think some of my coping mechanisms have turned into weird humor, and I would say I'm pretty high up there. And my love of ranch definitely puts me up there as well.
Ranch is in the sauce, or ranch is in like the place?
The dressing.
Okay.
Hidden Valley ranch dressing, specifically.
I put that on my sandwiches. I get it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Boop, this is the Gamerpreneur podcast. So I do need your gaming cred before we go too much further in kind of what it is you do today. And you kind of told me a little bit about kind of your later stages, but when did you first start playing video games?
I first started playing video games at 5 years old. I was visiting my family. My mom's Korean, and I was visiting my family in Korea, and he had a Nintendo. My uncle, Junseki, had a Nintendo, and I believe, I don't specifically remember what game it was, but it was a fighting game, and I'm pretty positive it was Mortal Kombat. At the time, as like a 5-year-old. That's at least what I remember. It could have been like King of Fighters or something, but it was definitely a fighting game. And I specifically remember him beating me 2 times in a row, and then I lost it. I had a full-on 5-year-old, 6-year-old child mental breakdown. And all I wanted to do was play until I could beat him. And then eventually he let me beat him. And that was kind of like the start of my gaming life. We went back home. My family ended up buying me a Nintendo. And, that was kind of it. And I was playing fighting games most of my life because up until recently, first-person shooters made me really nauseous and carsick. Is kind of what it felt like. And then once like the graphics for the computers got better and stuff, and Overwatch came out, Destiny and all that stuff, that's kind of the stuff I play. But right now, I would say the game I play the most is TFT. And then Overwatch and League of Legends is probably after that.
I love it. All right. You just answered another question I was going to have, which was, what do you play today? So you've been playing since Mortal Kombat. Yeah.
Allegedly.
If you had to pick one game over the scope of your entire career playing games, it's like the one you were trapped on with a desert island. You only get the one game for life. Which one would it be?
Okay, this is actually going to be a deep cut. Are you ready for this? It's Streets of Rage 3, which was like a Double Dragon kind of clone beat 'em up side scroller. Streets of Rage 4 just came out not too long ago, but Streets of Rage 3 was a game that, one, was so difficult to this day. With like a general 3 continue start, I have not beaten. Maybe it's my fault, but that's definitely the game that I've spent probably like the most individual time on. And if I were to give like a second more recent game, I love Overwatch, I love League of Legends, but if I have to go solo, it's got to be a fighting game, and right now that's Mortal Kombat 11.
I love it. All right. Now, Boop, that is an incredible background you gave here at the beginning of this. And what got you into Overwatch? Let's start there. Like, or maybe a little bit further back. Like, what got you to that day at that event? Kind of your professional background, your life background that got you there. That your husband told you to cast for the first time.
That's a really great question. So the initial kind of conversation of me getting into esports was actually from my ex at the time, who took me to my first Barcraft event, if you remember those. So basically, we had a bar here, Boulder Beer, that was usually closed on Sundays, but would host StarCraft events when there were events on Sundays, because the guy who owned the place was like a big StarCraft fan, and they would do like custom drinks. And I remember being like 20, 23, 24 and going to one of these and getting hammered and being like, this is awesome. You know, you know what I mean? Like, it was a totally new world. And like, I had such a good time. And I was like, I got to do this again. And so we went to like the next 3 Barcrafts, and then we broke up. And at that point in time, one of my biggest coping mechanisms was actually League of Legends, because that's where a lot of my friends were. And so throughout that, hard time for me, it was, a year of playing League with my friends. And then I met my husband, and he happened to be a gamer too. And I had briefly described like Barcraft, and we were watching some people cast. And I was like, I think I could do this. Like, no lie. Like, I'm not like being like looking at Tom Cruise in a movie and be like, I could be better. It was like, I think with my teaching experience and my public speaking experience and my unique voice, that this is a weirdly good fit for me. And so we had been talking about it, and I never committed, of course, because it's hard. And then once the world kind of gave us that opportunity, my husband took it for me. And volunteered me for it. And if it wasn't for those conversations beforehand of, oh, I would be good at this, I should try this, and the fact that we had one of the most popular LAN centers in the country at the time here in Colorado to provide even more experience, that wouldn't have happened. So it's all just like this, I saw someone on TV and I was like, I think I can be better than that. Right. And then I worked, and it's actually really funny because I ended up getting a lot of work through a lot of that stuff and a lot of that connection I made at that specific LAN center. So, opportunity meets preparation is, I think, the key in esports, right? Some of it can be luck when it comes to success here. But if you're not prepared for that opportunity, you're just going to fumble the ball. And I just made sure that I was always prepared for those opportunities to come, and it ended up working out.
Absolutely. Okay. So Boop, you've kind of already explained what your background is, what you got to where you at today, that you do the teaching and all that. So let's focus more on advice, because I really like to make the show about advice for my audience. Hopefully somebody's out there listening and they're watching Boop and they're like, hey, that sounds awesome. How do I get into it? How do I become a caster? What would you tell them?
Okay. First and foremost, you got to dive in. Right. The casting world is not something that has a lot of structure in it, to be completely honest with you. Right. So if you want to be involved in esports, not just as a caster, but behind the camera, as an observer, as a producer, as a tournament organizer, even as a mod, right? If you never ask, it'll never happen. So you have to dive right in. So my biggest thing is, number one, start with orgs that you know and you like, right? And see if they have any opportunities available for you that you would be interested in. Be very careful about working for free, right? Always be very aware of when companies are being predatory and you're not getting what you need out of it. That's always a bad sign. So that's another big piece of advice. Even if you haven't started before and if you've never cast, if it's going to be a free event for you, you have to make sure that it's worth it for you, and then make your decision. That's kind of like my advice on that right now. You have to send the email, right? You know how I have so much experience of, I'm just going to see what happens. And I send the email and I get something back, right? You're going to hear no more times than you're going to hear yes. But in this industry, all you need is one yes, right? So you keep going, you keep grinding, and you got to do what you got to do to get better too. So the best way to start casting, if you don't have a partner, or if you don't know how, is to take a VOD of your favorite game and put it on mute and cast over it. Then rewind it and see if what you said is the same thing as those casters. And that will kind of give you a good idea if you have a mind for it. And whether you're going to be a play-by-play caster, which is more the storyteller of the action, or the color caster or analyst, which is going to be kind of making sense of the action that the play-by-play has. And try both of them, right? There is no right way to get into the esports industry other than hard work and moxie, right? And passion. I always say, especially at my companies, that I cannot teach passion, but I can teach skill, right? So if you come to me with that passion, I'm going to help you, right? But if you come to me with no passion and just expect something because you're cool, right? That's not going to fly with me and most people. So in terms of casting, that's definitely the best way to get through, and the best way to become a producer and observer is just to ask, find the people in the industry that do this thing, and then ask them how they got there too. Because if there's anything that I know about at least my network people who do give advice and do mentor, is they will answer you. Don't be afraid, and don't be afraid to fail is the biggest thing. You are going to mess up. You know, every caster has a hot mic moment. Every caster has gotten something like, you know, just the other day, I was like, hey, can we not say that on stream because of this, this, and this? And I've been doing it for 6 years, right? And it was a very small thing, but it's gonna happen. And I thought about it for like 8 hours, dude. Right? It's like I got in trouble with my mom, and I hated myself for it. But, you know, I've developed skills to deal with that at this point in time as, you know, a guy in my 30s. But when you're 17, 18 years old, and this is going to be potentially the first way you do it, asking for help is the best way to do it right. And just pick your people, right? And if they don't answer, if they don't respond back, that's the worst that's happening, right? That is nothing to do with you. And you should never think that, right? So you gotta go for it. And if there's any industry that respects that grind and respects moxie, it's this one.
Okay, beautiful. That's some fantastic advice. Can I dive a little bit more? You said reach out to the people, get to know the people, lots of contacts. Who in the heck do I contact if I'm starting out? I don't know who I'm supposed to. Is it the tournament organizer? Who is it?
So, very good question. There's a couple ways of figuring this out. I particularly like using LinkedIn to find job titles of people, right? So, like, say I do get a response from somebody, sometimes I'll go to LinkedIn, look up that person, and see what their job title is. Because if I kind of make that pattern and say, okay, if this person is hiring casters at this company with this title, I can assume that this person with that same title is probably doing the same thing. You know what I mean? So, use what's out there and do a little bit of like friendly research when it comes to the people you're talking to. So you're also not talking to people who aren't going to hire you. You know what I mean? And who it is, it's all just you got to try and fail. Right? You can talk to me. You can always start with me, and anyone listening, please contact me if you need any help in this industry, because that's what I'm here for. I'm a mentor, I'm an evangelizer, and I love where I am, and I want other people to experience that. And so, you know, look up managing directors of esports companies. You could even talk to the social media managers for certain orgs, and they'll point you in the right direction, right? It's just you have to go into it with no expectations, right? If you go into it thinking that they're going to say yes or thinking that they're going to say no, you're only just setting yourself up for failure. But if you go into it just seeking information, you'll probably get the information that you want. So if they have open DMs, DM them, right? If you can find their, you know, after connecting on LinkedIn, usually their email will pop up for you. There you go. That's who you contact. And so it takes a lot of, again, self motivation to do these things, but the information is out there. Unfortunately, it's dispersed amongst like 15 different organizations, right? I can name 5 right now that do production, right? And so which one do you go to? Start with the game, start with your casters, see if your casters are casting for certain things, and then see what levels below those events are and what those casters are doing, right? And then you can ask them too. But yeah, it's all about just kind of finding the right terms and trying and failing, because it's going to happen. And if you avoid failure, you're never going to make it in esports.
Wonderful. Yep. It's all about a numbers game. Just more numbers, eventually get that
Cast
yes.
the wide net and see what comes back. That's how you start in most industries.
Okay. So Boop, you told me that they need to have passion in order to make this work. But what other skills are required other than a voice? I mean, can somebody with a gravelly voice pull this off too? Or like, is there a very narrow set of people that this will work for?
Okay, so this is a little bit of a moderately lukewarm take. So some people do believe that there is a casting voice, right? And those people have their opinions. I think they're wrong, right? I don't have a traditional casting voice by any means, and it has been a challenge to a certain extent. I've been told that my voice isn't masculine enough, right, for the audience of the game that I'm casting, and that's messed up, right? And so that those conversations do happen. But what's really funny is that now I'm hiring those casters, right? who told me that my voice wasn't good for this, right? And that's just kind of like my little segue of you never know who's going to be your boss one day, right? So you got to be nice to everybody, right? The esports world is known as a dog eat dog world, right? And I'm really, really trying to change that. I'm all about support. Collaboration and competition can happen. You can be whoever you want to be. I would love to see more non-binary, more women, more people of color taking part in our space because they have voices that need to be shared too. As a gay man, right, I'm one of 3 gay casters that I know, just full stop. Right. And I know how important it is when I see someone who, like Froskurin, who is a part of the LGBTQ community, cast for something like Riot. It gives me someone to look at to say, this is reality. I could be that person. Right. It's hard when you are a non-white male in general, but in the esports industry, there's a lot of history that you have to push back against in terms of what is traditional. Right. A lot of people think sports, esports, right? It's got to be like football. It's got to be, traditional ESPN stuff, right? And then there's a whole other group of people that believe the completely opposite thing that are all trying to make the same thing happen. And so what that means is that this guy is going to say, you know what, if you have an accent, you can't be a caster. And for me, I'm going to go, okay, if you improve, that's all I want. Right? Like you have to get opportunities to cast so you can make an argument for yourself a little bit later. And that's kind of what I'm saying. I think anyone can be a caster, no matter who you are, right? Yes, there are some voices that I'm like, oh man, you are a caster. You know what I mean? But I have a non-traditional voice. A lot of my friends have non-traditional voices in the casting business. And yes, they do get talked about and they do get debated. But in the end, I know I belong here because I'm good and I'm good enough to belong here. And that took me a lot of time. Right. So it's my goal that I went through that so other people can have an easier time entering the business and not seeing as many gatekeepers as I did when I first started, because the industry has evolved over the last, 3-4 years to be a lot more accepting. But back then it was, a shot in the dark a lot of the time, right? A lot of people had a lot of opinions on what a caster should sound like. And in my opinion, they're wrong. But I can't change their opinions. I don't live in their head. So if you do find yourself in that situation, just be like, you know what? You're not looking for me. Just like, for an acting part, this person's not going to be perfect for that. I'm not perfect for your organization, but that doesn't mean you're not perfect somewhere else. And it's statistically improbable that there is no one on the other side of that equation that will support you. And that's I think the biggest thing that's helped me.
I love that. Wonderful. All right. Boop, let's talk about you a little more personally, if we can. About how long ago was that day in that bar when your husband volunteered you?
It was about 3-4 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe.
Oh, okay. You've accomplished quite a lot in those couple of years. Okay. I want you to travel back in time with me. All right. We're going to go to that bar and I want you to walk up to your past self and I want you to tell him everything that happens over the next several years. I want, everything, all the knowledge, all the everything. But here's the one thing he absolutely has to know. What is that one thing?
Do not take long breaks. What's mine? I screwed myself after that first season of Contender. So the reason why I say that is because branding in our industry is very, very important, whether it be a company or a person, right? Because again, as someone who hires casters, if I look at you and I'm like, well, this guy or girl, or whatever pronoun they prefer, right, is casting, and I already have that, why am I going to get a second version of that? Right? So what are you going to offer that's different? And if I were to tell myself something way back then when I landed on Contenders, and then the first time when I was doing shoulder content, and then after that, when my face was out in the Overwatch community and people knew my name and a lot of people knew the Boop of the Week, for example, I then did nothing for 4 months. right? Because I was so bummed about not being picked up for, the other things. I sulked and I was, in my pity party and only I was invited to it and everyone was wrong. And, I've done a lot of maturing at the time too. And so the other thing I would say is like, dude, you're an idiot. Right. Like you don't know anything about this industry, right? Because I ended up, going into sales at one point. There's a lot of adjacent skills there. But like me sitting at Clutch Gaming Arena, like getting up to cast and thinking that I was like, hot stuff and everyone complimented me and it I just got to be like, you know what, be realistic. And when it matters, right, you have to keep working, right? I don't want people to think that they have to work 12 hours a day every day. That's not sustainable, right? And that's something that we are moving away from, I think, in esports as we speak, or attempting to move away from. But what I need to do is twice I kind of did that. Twice I fell off the face of the earth only to have to like come crawling back by a lot of social engagement and a lot of heavy networking once I like got over my pity parties.
Okay.
Yeah. I felt sorry for myself and I hate it. I hate it now looking back.
Okay. That kind of is a nice segue to my next question, because I actually believe that our failures in life teach us more than any success we might be able to get. Because when you succeed, you might not know what happened, but hey, I won, right? But when you fail, you got to take a good hard look at it. You got to be able to overcome it in order to succeed the next time. So I'd like to ask you, Boop, what do you consider as your biggest failure in life? And what did you learn from it?
My biggest failure in life, this actually is going to be a moderately unique answer. Some people might not understand it, is when I sold my tuba. So I was, man, this is just another one of those things where I just like graduated college and then did nothing. Anyway, it's a pattern. And so when I was a senior in college, I kind of decided that I was a music major. Tuba was my main instrument, the Hufflepuff of instruments. And I just wanted to take a break after college, right? And the best way to do that was to sell my tuba. What was really, really cool is that it was a lot of money, right? It was a very nice tuba, and I actually sold it to my teacher, which kind of made it okay. But it's actually been within the last like 3 or 4 years that I've realized that the reason why I stopped liking tuba in college is because it was my job. Right. And I had a very hard, and people do this in esports too, transition from hobby, this is a lifesaver situation for me, to now I'm required to do this. And like I have certain things I need to hit, certain marks, and my teacher needs to pass me. I have to have recitals and all that stuff. And I was just done with it. Right. And then I sold it. And I would say that's probably the thing I regret the most because, dude, I miss it. Right. It was my life for 4 years. And if I could have just realized that I was stressed out about college and it wasn't the tuba, right? That was the problem. It was me. That was the problem. And I just needed to grow and commit to some personal growth. I really feel like I have missed like a part of my body since that day, right? I just feel incomplete without being able to make music. And I do have a keyboard and I do have other things. I try to like write music, and I just bought a game recently called Fuser, which is like a DJ game. And none of it is the same. None of it is the same as sitting down with that tuba and just playing. And I haven't gotten that feeling in 10 years now, since I graduated college. And so while that might not be like I regret, saying this and this, I would say personally, in terms of my mental health, it probably would have been much better if I had an outlet much sooner, if I didn't kind of separate myself from it so quickly.
You can go get another one. It's not like it's too late.
It's so expensive. Tubas are so expensive, man. It's like back in the day, it was like, do you want a car or do you want a tuba? Right? And I picked tuba. At the time, man. I named it Thor. I miss him. And yeah, you can do it. But like also, the other thing is like when it comes to playing instruments, it's not like riding a bike, right? I will be like a middle school tuba player again. I actually have dreams where I play the tuba and I can't do it anymore. And it's like a nightmare. Like this really affects me, man.
Oh man. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. It is one of the most unique, but it's everybody has their thing, right?
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
I mean, I don't really regret a lot, right? Because I think everything happens for a reason. And regret is a temporary feeling. And so I try to make it as temporary as possible and keep trucking forward. But of all the things in my life in terms of bad decision making that I think of, for some reason, it's the tuba. That keeps popping back into my head.
All right. Well, on the flip side, what is something you're working to improve on in yourself today?
Not taking things personally. So this is actually really interesting. So now that I'm at Monkey Bubble, it's a completely European team, and I am the only American, and they just do things differently there. They're much more honest and direct than I had initially anticipated. And so when I would, it's funny because at my old company, I came in, with a lot of respect, and I'm pretty well known in those circles, especially in the Overwatch world. And I got to like stand up there and pontificate and like get that ego boost, right? With like no questions asked. And that was not a normal experience, I'm realizing, because now at Monkey Bubble, I say thing and everything gets questioned. And it's not something that I've really had to deal with in the past, is acknowledging that I may have to argue for my beliefs here, right? And while that's coming from a place of privilege, 100%, right? It was a little bit of a shock to me to say, all right, I want to do this, and having 4 people be like, that's a dumb idea. And then I'm like, but this, and this. And then like an hour later, I'm like, it's a dumb idea. But when they said that, I was like, oh, how dare you? I'm your boss. You know what I mean? And then I realized it's just like people work in their ways, and instead of having like 4 and 5 people adjust to my style, which is very American, I would say, it's a very American, white guy thing of me to say. I adjusted a little bit to them, and now when they say things, when they're making fun of each other, I'm realizing that none of it is personal. Right. And so all of these things are just like how you rib your friends. Right. And your family members, when you talk to each other negatively, it's a thing of love sometimes. In terms of how it's working there, I think that's what I'm really proud of, is understanding that feedback isn't necessarily a personal attack all the time. Right. And to be a filter, not a sponge, because if you take all feedback, you lose your identity, in my opinion. So always filter your feedback from anybody, including myself, even though I'm perfect.
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, but that's definitely the thing I'm working on the most, is just like when people talk about my casting or have a question about my idea, it's not me that they're talking about, right? It's something that I can improve upon. And in the end, they're trying to help. While of course, like there's a lot of arguments to say a bunch of different things, I'm just really proud of the fact that me and my team have been able to adjust over the last month and kind of realize our communication styles. And instead of forcing communication styles, which I know a lot of management does, we're doing it collaboratively. And that's actually really, really cool.
Wonderful. If only every business could be like that, right?
Right. And preaching to the choir.
All right. Boop, this has been a fantastic interview. Thank you so much. How do people find you? Where are you at on social media, contact information, all that, please?
You can find me on Twitter. I'm a Twitter main, as I like to say, at boopasaurusrex. If you want some political hot takes, you'll find them there. If you want to find that out about me, as well as all of the stuff that Monkey Bubble is doing, along with Tier 2 Overwatch and other events that we are going to be putting on. If you want to learn more about Monkey Bubble, please go to monkeybubble.gg, or you can just find me on Twitter and message me. I'm always happy to talk about esports or anything, from the basics of what is esports to the demographics and how they, affect certain events in certain communities, right? Like how the demographics of TFT and Overwatch affect how they're portrayed and advertised to the general audience, right? That type of philosophical stuff I'm totally down to. And I'm really into the pedagogy of casting right now. So if you have any other questions, like Twitter's definitely the best way to get to me. On Twitter is also my email, my personal contact through my email. And so again, feel free to message me there if you have any questions. And if you find me on Discord, that's probably a good way to talk to me too. I'm in a lot of kind of gaming and community Discords. If you pop my name, again, I'm always open to talk.
Wonderful. Can't say I've met too many pedagogues. All right. So, Boop, as we wrap this up, do you have any final thoughts you want to share, or anything I didn't ask you think we still need to cover?
Yeah, I do. So the biggest thing that I want to share is actually something that we briefly touched on, which is representation in our community. I think, I just want everyone real quick to imagine who they think a gamer is real quick, right? We all just imagine the same person, most likely, right? And so what I want people to know is that that's not just for a gamer. People do that in all aspects of our industry, right? So we are needing community to show that, hey, representation's awesome, right? And we need more people to come in and support the positive aspects of what esports can bring to communities. And as people come into our community and as this industry grows, we're going to have a lot of room for new people. And I just want those new people to be good people, right? So if you have any issues or if you have anything that you need to talk about, this industry can be stressful, right? It's very emotional. If you're a caster, they're judging you. Right. And that can be very, very hard. But know that there are people out there, no matter who you are, what you look like, what you identify as, that are here to support you in this industry and help you out, because there's a space for you here. And so that's kind of what I really, really wanted to get across is, if you didn't believe that before, at least if you come towards, if you talk to me and the majority of esports, you do have a place here. And I'm really excited to help you get there.
I love that point. And, I'll admit, when I first started the show, I actually kind of had in my head an idea of what that typical gamer was. But after 100, nearly 200 interviews now, there's no such thing. There's no such thing as a typical gamer. If you pulling a card out of a deck, you don't know what you're going to get.
Exactly. And I think it's really important for people to understand that they can come with like that idea, right? That even age can be a thing in the gaming community that people really, harp on. Like being 30, and I go into a game, people pick me last, right? It's deserved because I suck. But if I didn't, you know what I mean? And I like to use humor and satire to talk about some of these tougher subjects, but you're right. When you imagine who something is, hopefully it changes every time you do that exercise, right? And that's where I want this community and this industry to go, to say, no matter who you are, no matter what you look like, again, and no matter what you identify as, right? There is a place for here, and there are people here that share a lot of those same stories as you. We can be hard to find, right? But I'm an out and proud gay man in the esports industry, managing an esports company, right? And while being gay is an aspect of me, what I'm really most proud of is the fact that I can stand up here and say, you know what? This is awesome. I'm here, and no matter who you are, if I can do it, because like I said earlier, I was an idiot in college. I majored in tuba, right? you know what I mean? And I still made it, right? And I talked about all these times where I was lazy, and I talked about all these times that I could have been better, and I'm here now. And whatever it takes to get you here too is exactly, and every one of you is worth it. And you guys got to feel value on yourselves too, right? Advocate for yourselves, use your support systems. And I can't wait again to talk to you and see what we can do together in the esports space.
That is just so fantastic. Boop, thank you so much for coming on with us today. I genuinely do appreciate it.
Of course, it was fun. I love talking. We're casters, right?
Absolutely. You started talking, and immediately my first thought was, man, I love talking to casters because I don't have to fill any dead air.
I know, right? It's like literally our job. If there's something else that makes me mega anxious, it's silence. So I think I got into the right industry.
All right. Well, thank you again, Boop.
Of course.
And for everybody else, I'm going to remind you all, don't be just a gamer, be a gamerpreneur.